Welcome to Blacklight on Sports, hosted by MSR veteran reporters Dr. Mitchell McDonald and Charles Hallman. Our guest tonight is Gabrielle Greer, who I met earlier this year. She was working with the Big Ten Conference and the Minnesota Sports and Events. And I was intrigued by what she wanted to do with the Big Ten tournament that was coming here for the second year in a row and connecting the community with those big events. As I shared with her, is that many times they bring events to cities like this, the community don't get involved other than buying tickets and maybe going to games, but really getting out in the community outside of downtown doesn't always happen. But she was determined to make sure that happened. So Gabrielle, I'm glad that you came to us tonight, and I'd like you to talk about the things that you've done leading into that tournament, things coming out that tournament, and just the things that you see that was important to represent our community.
All right, very happy to be in this conversation with y'all today. I think there's a couple of things to start with. The first is just who I am and a little bit about my background. So my name is Gabrielle Greer. Spent a lot of time on the north side. Used to my old stopping grounds were Franklin Middle School, where I had, teachers and mentors that were telling me that it was okay to try stuff. And so I had a lot of people that were open to me tinkering, as I say. And that meant sometimes giving me opportunities to do things that I wasn't necessarily always ready for, but positioning me in between that sweet spot between what my hard skills were and what risk was. And I think that that is a good depiction of how I show up in community. Like, what are the things that we've been demonstrating for years that our young people have skills for, our community has been wishing, hoping, wanting for, and we just need something, someone to support on the risk side. Now, risk for us sometimes means, are we well resourced? It also means this might not be a familiar approach to what you're used to, but this is what feels culturally important to us. Can we try this? Can we express this? Can there be an opportunity in space? So I think the relationship around hard skills, opportunity for risk, and then the relationship around opportunity and access, that is the recipe for what I'm about.
You speak so eloquently on things that you do, but you know it's more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the things
Yes.
that you've done, because again, you made some powerful statements in front of a whole bunch of folks who wasn't even from here,
Truly.
and you made sure that you got your point across, and that impressed me, and that's why I wanted to talk with you and kept in touch with you throughout the last few months.
Okay, so let's talk about it.
And what
So
point did you get across?
let's talk about it. So I I was the kid whose family got the opportunity through affordable housing to move out the city. So move from the north side on Penn to Wyzetta. And I was a gymnast for my whole life and spent a lot of time in the clubs and really had an opportunity in track to like do the thing. And what was the most challenging thing was just that I had to do it alone. There was nobody around me that looked like me that understood when I said I wanted to have the Michael Jackson floor routine and I wanted to have that music. Who was that was like impossible to get. Like, oh my God, we have to like search. Don't you just want to go with the classical ballads? No, I don't. Um and but to figure out how does cultural expression, individual athlete's identity, work inside of the community and the culture of that sport. So during my time, so we're talking about the late 90s, like early 2000s, when I was really involved in the sport, there were not a lot of black gymnasts. That was like irrelevant. It was like the beginning era of the Tiger Woods in golf, or the twins Serena and Venus during tennis. Like there weren't very many people that were doing the sport. and participating in the sport. And I think those experiences are really what has led me to say those bold statements that I said at Big Ten because I lived it. I know what it's like for my Black family to show up to a sporting event and be like, whew, well, look around. I don't really know. I guess we're just getting the ticket. We're going to watch you and then we're going home. And could there be an opportunity for that not to be true when Black folks show up to sporting events, whether it's a new sport that we're getting into or that we've never had access to, or it's the sports that we've dominated that typically don't have events that reflect us culturally when people show up? And so, luckily, I had the opportunity to build a relationship with Wendy Blackshaw, who is the CEO and president of the Sports Commission, who honestly has been doing a lot of things behind the scenes to figure out what is the right sauce to get in community. Who are the people, and how do we ensure that this happens right? So that was the beginning stages of figuring out how can I be positioned and get involved inside of legacy initiatives. And the legacy initiatives with the Sports Commission are deeply connected to community.
Just I attended a couple of the events that was going on through the Black Big Ten tournament. You had a community conversations. One was on DEI, which is seemed to be the political buzzword these days, and then the second one was on Black mental health. You also had an event at Farview Recreation Center, which we know is historical in terms of where sports at the north side comes out, and then you also had something at LA MLK Park in St. Paul. Both those things, and I talked to you about this earlier. 5 years ago, I don't think would have been connected with a Big Ten tournament or any kind of tournament like that because they was in the hood. Okay. And so therefore, when I would ask people, are you going to do anything in the community? They look at me like, well, we're in downtown. Well, downtown's not the community. You know, downtown is downtown. That people don't go out there. But you made a conscious effort for those things to happen. Now I don't want you to rehash those events because they was very good events. But because you was involved with that, those things happen. And I think if you wasn't there, those things probably would not have happened in that same scale. I'm giving you some flowers, so you better take them right now.
I'm holding them. Let me go water them. But Coach, I think that's important because, a lot of people say, what are the benefits of being in a relationship with people that look different from you? What is the benefits of, you know, risking what those relationships and those dynamics look like? And I feel like this is an example of that. It is to say that, no, I don't necessarily culturally, um, there are a lot of different cultural differences between myself and the people that work at the Sports Commission, and that's okay. And it is to say, for me to say, okay, but there are people and there are coaches and there are athletes who've been holding it down in community for decades that never get any light. They're just doing them late hours, doing the pickups, the drop-offs, they're purchasing uniforms. They done put 3, 4 kids on all kind of groceries and personal needs of athletes for years. And to me, those are the heroes of our community. They are the reasons why there are Big Ten athletes. Like let's be honest. Like the kids that show up at Farview who had the coach, who stayed late to make sure that they had the space to understand not just about how to be a strong athlete, but how to be a strong human and like have the wraparound things that they needed to show up. Like that's what I was hoping could be shined on during Big Ten. So I also have to shout out Big Ten because they were a big part of what I talked about in the beginning. They were willing to couple resources and say, no, we want to invest. When Big Ten leaves the Twin Cities, we do want to leave an impact. And we know we can't do all the things and support all of the things, but Gabrielle, like, what could we do? And so, it was being in relationship with community and asking people straight up, like, what are the needs? What are the basic needs that would be helpful? and that led to some small renovations at both MLK and at Farview, but weren't decisions that were made by the Sports Commission and were not decisions that were made by Big Ten or me for that matter. They were decisions that were influenced specifically by the people who were influential and impactful to those spaces. And that to me is what it's about. It's like, how can my position in partnership with the city and the sports commission be bridges or gateways to shine light and have access to people who deserve that and have always deserved that, and particularly our Black kids who are extremely worth someone saying, yeah, you should, yeah, a new scoreboard so you can actually, you don't have someone at the games like doing it manually, or like adjustable training equipment so that kids can learn how the sport of basketball early. Those aren't heavy lifts. We just didn't know that that was a need. And you couldn't have known that was a need because the relationships weren't there. Mm-hmm. So if I can be the support to that all day, that's what I'm about.
Who are some of the people in your life that have motivated you or influenced you to do what you're doing right now?
It's a really good question. There are many people. It changes depending on the day. But I will say this. I just talked about her recently in a keynote, but her name was Miss Johnson, and she was like the after school person that we went to, who lived in our building when my family lived in Brooklyn Center. And she was maybe in her 70s. But Miss Johnson always made space for me to not do anything. And that seems so, arbitrary, but it actually was extremely important for me during that time to, with all the tumultuous things that were happening in my family and changes and movements and, to have some space, just one space that didn't require me to do anything. I could just be there. And she was always going to have hot dogs and, be listening to jazz music on her record player and leaving me alone. And just having the ability to be, we call it together alone time. We're together, but I'm alone. And how much that also shows up in sports. I think that she was definitely a mirror to coaches that I had too.
Okay.
Now in a couple months, we'll have the USA Gymnastics tryouts or pick out the gymnastics national team. You said you was in gymnastics. Mm-hmm. I think I even asked you the question when they had the big kickoff. Well, okay, how many Black gymnasts going to be here, and how many Black people going to come and watch the gymnasts? Mm-hmm. So what are your plans, or if you can disclose them? How are you going to connect again the Black community to a sport that's not typically, other than a Gabby, other than a Simone, don't get that kind of recognition because they're not so-called the Black sports that we see all the time, which is basketball, football.
Mm-hmm. I want to start by saying that I think a lot of, very similarly to the way that adults are left out of certain job opportunities and experiences, it's the same way that, us in the community have not had access to be a part of certain sports. So that means, unfortunately, then that there are fewer of us. And so I think I'm really excited about this the new wave in gymnastics, because it's not just on the girls' side, it's also men's gymnastics. I know y'all know all kinds of nephews, cousins that used to flip in the park and flip on the mattresses and doing back tucks and back handsprings in the grass, falling on their head and getting up and doing it again. The acrobatic and athleticism and strength has always been a part of who we are as athletes. And I do believe there would be more if there was access. I just know that. So I wanted to say that, and just to know that USAG right now, there are more Black athletes on the national team roster than there have ever been in history. And last year, it was the first time that 3 Black women across the diaspora, so South America and United States, were gold through bronze, on the world stage. That was the first time that ever happened. And I think that shocked the nation and shocked a whole bunch of little Black girls watching, like, oh, all of them are Black? It's not just Simone. It's, who is this Rebecca Andrada and where is she from? Oh, she's a Black South American? What does that mean? Oh, so this excitement around Black identity, not just being specific to the United States, but being global, I think has also been a change maker in the gymnastics community. But to answer your question, Coach, I had to say those things because they're important. You always talk about history. This is a historical moment. So on June 11th, we will be hosting a community event at a gym called RGC. It is a gym that has, when you ask around in community, both in the gymnastics community and locally, like, where should you send your kids? Where are they safe? Where are they seen, no matter what their body type is or their background? This is the club that everybody says. And so again, like Farview or like MLK, I'm listening and responding to community. So we're going to hold a community event there. It's going to be an all-day experience. It is an opportunity to provide access to kids who've never done gymnastics before, to have exposure and to experience it. I can't tell you who's going to be there yet, but we will have some legends in the building who will demonstrate, I think, the commitment around, the first means something. And first doesn't necessarily means last. First means you're creating space for others to follow you, and wanting them to be able to tell their story. So there's going to be food, they're going to get good stuff, they're going to be able to explore all the different equipment. We'll have sports nutritionists there, sports psychologists, and a lot of brown and Black people who've devoted time and energy to making space for uh Black kids in gymnastics, and to show that, like, we may be hidden but we're here.
That's great. Just want to change. We talked a lot before we started our program this evening, uh, and I want you to touch upon that. You just came back from a conference on NIL, and that seemed to be another buzzword that seemed like changes every day. I call it the Wild Wild West. We don't know there's rules. We don't know what are rules. We don't know what's going. But you wasn't exposed to that environment, people you talk to. So talk to our viewers and talk to us about what you learned and what we need to be more aware of as we continue to explore and to educate what NIL really is.
So first I have to shout out a really good friend of mine. His name is Tyree Burke. Y'all should know him. I actually think Ty should be on the show. But Ty owns one of the largest sports insurance companies for athletes in the nation. Black dude out of Chicago. He was a basketball player. He's here now and he's just phenomenal. And so he co-did this NAL summit with a group called Open Doors. They're one of the largest folks in the NIL game. And it was a variety of people, from brands to athletic directors to a variety of people that were in conversation around what are the politics around NAL and what does this mean for athletes in general? What does this mean for institutions? What does this mean for the marketing and branding companies? Like, how is this changing? And I would say the three biggest takeaways for me were: one, it is the Wild Wild West. With NIL regulations being so new within the last 3 years, there are a lot of figuring it out as you go moments that are happening. And so I think that there's going to be a significant amount of changes that are going to come over the next 3 to 5 years that demonstrate and show that. The second thing I would say is that this means a lot for our community, because that means that kids who are coming into the sport, I mean, really, really, let's think about it. Like, even if you're not a Caitlin Clark and you get $3.2 million in NIL sponsorship deals, maybe you just got a couple local brands that are sponsoring you and you're getting somewhere between $50 to $70,000 wasn't even a opportunity for me. And so to see these young people who are on social media, they have their own brands, they have companies that are sponsoring them. They might get paid, $25 to $50 per post that they do on social media as a start. But let's also think about what that means for them on the background. That means I now understand what it means to have an LLC because I have to have a company where that money tracks. It means I understand 1099s. That means I understand how to be an independent contractor. I'm negotiating deals, and you're doing that earlier. And so I do think that there is a movement that's happening for our community behind the scenes that people aren't talking about, which means young people are learning how to be independent entrepreneurs and own business and negotiate contracts about their gifts early in life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means in terms of college, I don't know. What that means in terms of them and their transition out of athleticism, being an athlete, I also don't know. But I do know that those two things are running in parallel when we're talking about NILs. Like I'm an athlete, but I'm also a brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm understanding what it means to have a brand. And because a lot of NIL deals are also have commitments that are connected to them. So yes, we want you to post, but we also really care about community. So like we need to see you out in community volunteering. And now that volunteerism isn't just connected to you being a student, it's connected to the things you care about. So you get to decide, I care about puppies, so I only want to go volunteer where there's puppies. Or I really care about, gun violence, and that's really important to me. So I want to do things in community that are about that. That part around not just having hobbies or being on your phone, but now being on your phone has an intention because it's connected to your company. And that's exciting to me.
I when you talk to traditionalists when it comes to college sports, they talk about this is going to create the have and the have-nots. This is going to create schools who can pay versus those who can't. It's going to come to the point where they'll spoil or ruin college sports. What do you say to people who are saying that? Because again, NIL is new, but the issue of athletes getting paid is not new. That's been in the courts for years, and it's always been that dichotomy or that argument. Well, are athletes really employees of the school, or are they there to whatever? And they raising money and everybody getting paid but the kids. Okay, I mean, coaches are making $1 million contracts and they complain about kids want to get a little piece of the pie. So speak on that in terms of just you know, it is still new, but we still need to how we need to embrace that because it is something that's going to be here. It's not going to go away.
This might be the millennial in me, but um I feel like this is no different than anything else. People said that like our ears were going to fall off, from cell phones. And then, there was this whole thing about, the explosion of Y2K. People were like preparing for the internet to crash. We've had all these examples of what happens when major change requires people to assess what are they holding as their tradition. So to the traditionalists, I say, what actually is the tradition you're wanting to maintain in relationship to college athletics? And when we assess what the tradition is, from my point of view, it meant that amazing, talented athletes were bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars into the institution and were not being compensated for their contribution to the sports. That's just period. That's how I feel. And also, I think, millennial, so I'm sitting in the middle. I also feel like I'm seeing a lot of twists and turns around NILs, and I do wonder who's not going to get, what happens to the athletes that don't get the big deals? You know, like what if you're the kid that you're just a solid athlete, you're coachable, you know, you get good grades or you're doing all right and you're just trying to play. And what if you don't come with a big brand? What if you don't come with a big brand identity? I do think it will make it harder for athletes to transition into the world given NILs. I believe that.
I'm also concerned a little bit that I want these athletes to get the right kind of guidance and counseling. I don't want to see them signing something and find out that was something they shouldn't have signed. That's going to get them into something that they'll be stuck with for the next 20 years. There's a lawsuit out now. A Chicago Bears player had signed an NIL deal when he was in college, didn't know he was signing something that he's going to give away everything that he ever gets for the next 15 years if he became a professional. Well, he became a professional. So now they said that he has to pay at least 50% of anything he makes to this company because they gave him a bonus. And now they want more than that. And so the lawsuit is being enjoined by the state of Florida because they feel that he was signed underage. And so therefore it's and therefore you can't sign a kid underage, that kind of deal, because he wasn't 21 or above that. Now that lawsuit hasn't been talked about a lot. It's been definitely hidden, but he's a rookie at the Chicago Bears because he's just signed a big contract, and they said okay. And then they showed up this group that he signed with. He forgot that he had signed with. Now come out and say, and some of the perks that they're supposed to get is Super Bowl tickets, whether he's in the Super Bowl or not. And they wanted not, you know, in a seat. They wanted suites, and that anything he signed, they would get to that. So I'm concerned by that. I want them to be able to get the right kind of counseling, either legal counseling or financial counseling, whatever. So your thoughts on that?
I want to know your thoughts too, but I'll say this. I think this has been a pain point in our community for a very long time about kids and all of us being resourced. And I think there's, you know, this intersection between financial resources and then what happens when the finances are there, and who do you have in your life? If you're the first person in your family to ever sign a major deal of any kind, no one in your life has ever had to negotiate or handle that amount of money. It's not that they're not capable of guiding, because I think there's some guidance that can happen, but when we're talking about um, the ability to actually do business transactions and negotiations, definitely if it's legal, you need a legal team that can back you up. And you know, some of the major NIL deals that comes with it, there are people that are in the NIL network that get assigned to you to support negotiating that. I can't remember their titles right now. They're many different titles across institutions, but their job is to do that. So because athletes don't they're not in control of the dollars. The dollars sit inside of the institution and then are monitored by these different groups across the institution. So there is some level of support and protection when it comes to NILs, but also, of course, you know, there are other athletes who aren't getting that support either at home or, you know, personally in their lives. So yeah, I think that's always been a big deal, is support.
I think that being an educator myself, um, they probably need to revamp the education program and even have classes that deal with NIL, because it can be helpful to anyone, because they might have a family member that, or some, or their best friends or whatever, that that are going to be signing deals. Because right now, you know, as a young person, you know, we see dollar signs. We saw dollar signs. We still do as adults, but you know, you're just thinking of, you know, I'm gonna get an NIL deal to play volleyball or to play basketball or what have you, but you don't have the knowledge of what that is. You're coming into college because you're gonna play a sport. So I think it's really tough because it's new.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Charles was saying, and enough people aren't educated. We're not educated.
Mm-hmm.
I just know, that the transfer portals for major sports are going great because people are getting deals. And like Charles said, some people, and you said it too, don't have the legal expertise behind them. They're just signing deals because they're hearing the ka-ching. So I mean, another in another question that I wanted to ask was that as you put on these events, as you help coordinate these events, do you have aspirations? Do you have goals in sight? Is there, what's the motivation behind
Mm-hmm.
what you do? It seems like there might be a few things that motivate you.
Mm. Do you want to share what you think they are?
Do I want to share anything there? See, there you go.
Please.
You're redirecting the question back at me.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I know.
So I'll tell you, like, one of my mentors said recently, that if I owned a whole bunch of buildings, I wouldn't be doing events because I'd have the space to occupy. And I would say the main things that I care about is that I was a kid who was this hybrid, very similar to actually when we were talking to our wonderful entrepreneur Ricky Collins earlier about the balance between um, being a creative person and an athlete, which means you kind of have both of those things. And I hold both of those things very, very close to my heart. My mom is an artist, and my dad was like the athlete and the entrepreneur. So I got a good mixture.
Mhm.
And so what I care most about is us having space to be seen and recognized and validate things that are deeply connected to our identity. And I would say that means for me that I think very heavily in the mind. Now I'm going to get a little, theoretical, but I think very heavily in the mindset of conceptualism, which means that it's an artistic practice that means it doesn't really matter where or what materials or spaces I am in. I'm going to utilize whatever is around to actualize whatever our dreams are, and to say that Black people have always been important. They're important today and they're important forever. And so, if that means that I'm deeply connected in sports and entertainment and I'm supporting that realm being great, then those are my materials that I'm helping bring concept to actualization. And if it means that I'm in community doing community development work, then that is the material that I get to use to do that. So I would say my commitment is around helping actualize things that are important to us and have always been important to us, and doing that in whatever I have access and whomever I have access to bring it to life.
Okay.
As we wrap things up, anything that we didn't ask of you, because you can talk, you know that. So, I mean, we got enough tape to run this for a while, but anything we didn't ask you that you really want to share, because the title is Blacklight on Sports. And that's why we titled it that way, because we want people to see Black people
Mm-hmm.
doing things in the community that they don't know they're
Mm-hmm.
doing things in the community. They don't know. So it's not just, so if we can make you famous, more famous than you are, we're going to do that. But if anything that we didn't ask you that you like to share as we wrap things up.
Before I start, Coach, all I want to say is it takes one to know one. Okay. So if I can talk, so can you. We can equally hold it down for hours. Let me just say that.
That is true. That is true.
um, I think the biggest thing that I hope people walk away knowing is that um, it is important to remember that the skills of an athlete do transfer. And the athlete brain never turns off. And so I used to study the process of how to be technically inclined in skill development in gymnastics. That just transferred over into wanting to be technically rich in making space and activating space for our community, that those skills do transfer. And I know I've heard a lot of people across communities say a lot of negative things about athletes, like, oh, they only aspire to be basketball stars or they only aspire to be football stars. And it's like, well, if we had the space to help teach them that those skills that you're learning, all them hours you're putting in on the football field, all those hours you're putting into the court, that training and that discipline does transfer into your adult life if you have people helping to mold and shape that. So I would say the testament to who I am as an entrepreneur is deeply connected to the coaches who were invested in me and helped me see those interconnections between what it meant to be an athlete and what it meant to be a functional, aspiring adult. So, Blacklight on Sports is also about the transference of skills and knowledge from the gym to the courtroom.
Couldn't say it better.
All right. Well, I appreciate y'all.
I
Thank you for
appreciate
Yeah.
it.
having me.
Yeah, no problem at all.
So thank you for being with us. This is Gabrielle Greer, who's definitely is a up and comer. If she's not already, she's going to be, and she's a rising star. And I'm very proud to know you and gotten a chance to meet you. And definitely we will keep in touch, because that's what we need to do. We need to always bring up and elevate our people, because if we don't do, who else going to do it? So it's very important, and especially in our area. And it's not about anything more than just doing that. Because if we can lift you up, someone else going to lift you up, and then we can lift somebody else up. And as opposed to just picking on certain people and making them look good, and everybody else is nowhere to be found. So thank you for being with us. My name is Charles Hallman. This is Dr. Mitchell McDonald. This is Gabrielle Greer, and we thank you for being on Blacklight on Sports, and hope to tune with us soon.